Yes, guys, welcome back to the channel, CTB Cam Talks Boxing. We've got the second podcast of Come Chat with Cam. We've got Luke from Simbox on today. How you doing, Luke?
Yeah, I'm all good, thanks, Cam. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
No problem, all good, all good. It's good we actually managed to fit this in. I know we're both quite busy, but yeah, let's go straight into it. So, I guess you watched the fight this past weekend, USYK Joshua 2. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it was a huge occasion, wasn't it? And I said this on Twitter in the build up to the fight that it didn't have that usual anti-Joshua buzz, and yeah, it was still on Sky Sports, but the fact that it was going over to the zone after the fight, and the fact that it was delayed and it was out in Saudi, and Usyk to us hardcore fans is a huge star, is a huge figure in the sport of boxing, but he's not got that crossover appeal. That's not downplaying him in any kind of way. He's not the kind of guy that you're going to go to the supermarket and everyone's going to recognize the name. Kind of the way when Tyson Fury fought Dillian White arguably is definitely to British general public is a bigger name. So yeah, I just think there was a few bits and bats that were missing, that kind of didn't give it that big fight build up until fight week. And then when you start getting the final press conference, the public workout, you kind of get that, I'm sure you get the same butterfly feelings where you find yourself, in the middle of the day at work or whatnot, you just kind of sat there and you're like, what if he uppercuts him? Or what if he can't get inside? And you start questioning about the fight there. So eventually that did come along and we did get the big fight feel. And then on the night, I thought it was a decent card. I didn't watch some of the early stuff, the YouTuber making his debut and stuff like that. But Ron Ali and was in a good fight. Callum Smith was spectacular. And Zhang, what fight that turned into. And then, of course,
that was probably one of the most entertaining fights of the night. That was up there with the main event, to be honest. What do you think? Did you watch that full fight? Because for me, I think Zhang won that. I'll be honest with you.
I think, given that he had the knockdown as well, I don't know how you can score that fight to Hrgović. It can have it close, of course, but yeah, Zhang won that fight for me, and I didn't think he had it in him. I watched him against Jerry Forrest. I think he was on the Canelo undercard. And he gassed out after 6 rounds. And I thought, if you're gassing in front of Hrgović, what we've seen from Hrgović up till now, you're going to get took out and you're going to get brutally took out. But it just didn't happen. Zhang kept going, almost like he lulled Filip Hrgović into a false sense of security. Maybe Hrgović thought he was going to slow, and it just didn't happen.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because obviously Hrgović was seen as the big man of the division. No one wants to fight him. Obviously Parker didn't fight him, end up fighting him. No one's really fighting him. And then you look at Zhang as well. He's about 38, I think. He's between 38 and 40.
39, yeah.
Yeah, and you just think, Zhang's going to get stopped inside 6 rounds. And Zhang obviously got off to a really good start. And I was just, I was saying to my mate, I was like, no, don't worry, trust me, Hrgović will stop him soon. And then I think the headbutt happened. And then from then on, I think Zhang just took control. And to be honest, Hrgović looked out on his feet at times in the fight. So, I think I agree with you, Zhang should have definitely got that decision. But looking at the new Ring Magazine heavyweight rankings, at least he's still in the top 10. And for me, I think that would be a good fight for Joshua to actually have like a warm-up fight. Him against Zhang would be a good, nice little fight. But I mean, main event was a cracker, to be honest. I know it wasn't as action-packed as the co-main.
It was tense, though, wasn't it? It was tense. You always Joshua's one of them fighters now, and he's never going to shake that tag of he's going to get knocked out or he's going to knock somebody out. And even though this fight did go the distance both times with Usyk, there's times, especially in that 10th round in the second fight, where you're kind of watching it behind the sofa and you're thinking, he's just one punch away from being took out. So as much as it wasn't an enthralling back and forth Hagler-Hearns kind of fight, it was on the end of your seat, and Joshua was fantastic, I thought, and Usyk was equally as good, and obviously that little bit better because he went on and got the decision. I think in the immediate aftermath, I thought, and I'm going to get called out for this because you've seen my Twitter, mate. I'm a big anti-Joshua fan, and I make no secret of that.
How did you score the fight?
Loosely, after 6 rounds, I had Joshua in the lead after 6 rounds, and then 7, 8 is a toss-up. You could give them to Josh. 9 was Joshua round. 9 was his best round, and then 10, 11, 12. Usyk pulled away. So depending on how you had it after 8 rounds, then Joshua won round 9, Usyk at the last 3. I couldn't argue with a draw or a round each way. But my initial thought, and I've been called out for it, of course, was that I had Joshua winning the fight.
Really?
Well, robbery, nowhere near that.
Yeah, to be honest, I actually need to rewatch it. But for me, I was really like supporting AJ, and I was going. But it's just like towards the end, for me, after the ninth round, I feel like that's where that was the deciding factor. I think Usyk won those championship rounds, as you had it as well. But I think that's the thing. A lot of those early rounds were very close, and it's to me, it's like what you were looking at. Was you looking at like the more powerful shots, the body work from AJ, or because I don't think they threw much either. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I saw, they weren't throwing a lot. Even Usyk wasn't throwing that much. It was very technical, as you said. So I think I need to rewatch that back. For me, yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't. That's the thing. A lot of people didn't have AJ winning, and whoever said, and to those who actually said that, they did get a lot of stick because I think Steve Bunce, I think he had AJ winning as well, and he got roasted.
Yeah, like I say, I'm probably making this argument. Like I say, I'm giving you my mindset from the instant reaction to the fight. In the days afterwards, it has mellowed out a little bit. And yeah, like I say, I'm not screaming, "Oh my god, it was a robbery." Joshua definitely had this fight. I'm just saying, in my instant reaction when I was watching the fight, I thought it was a close fight.
Yeah, that makes sense. But
and I love Usyk as well. Usyk's brilliant. You know, what a character. And I was trying to emphasise this in the build-up that, you know, I'm supporting Anthony Joshua. I'm fully behind Anthony Joshua going in there, becoming a 3-time heavyweight champion of the world. But in no way am I against Usyk winning. If Usyk wins, then I'm all for that as well. I think he's a brilliant character. And, yeah, really look forward to a potential fight with Tyson Fury if that does come to fruition.
Wow, and with that, I think... Well, this week's there's been quite a lot of talk about that next fight, hasn't it? Like, well, what annoys me is the week starts off well. Frank Warren saying, "Look, it's almost made. Really, they just need to choose like the site and where it's going to be." I think he said 50-50 split. And then the next day, Fury comes out as he's been doing recently, very annoyingly, and he goes, he wants 500 million.
That's it. I just. The outer ring antics of Tyson Fury, again, I make no secret of it on social media. Is he all playing us? You know, am I on one of his many strings where he's out here controlling the narrative? He says one thing, does another, and he probably doesn't know what he's going to say tomorrow until he wakes up. You know, I think Bob Arum said, today I'm telling you the truth, yesterday I lied to you, and that's rubbing off on Tyson Fury. But it gets to the point where it's just tedious and it's bullshit, and you're kind of thinking, just fight. You know, this whole situation with Derek Chisora, he offered him 2 million, but Chisora wanted 3. Well, if it's not about the money to Tyson Fury, put up another $1 million, and make that fight if that's the way you're going. So it's just that whole circus. That's all it is, a circus. Frank Warren, even himself, I think he's tired of it, and he just kind of goes, he's just backing him, isn't he? It's Tyson. He does as he pleases. He says what he wants. And even John Fiore said it in the past, take what Tyson says with a pinch of salt. But I think sometimes it's the fans, it's the hangers-on that hang on every word that he says and take it as gospel, and you kind of arguing with a brick wall at times.
I tell you what, Luke, I totally agree with you, and that's saying something because I'm such a big Tyson Fury fan. I love the guy. Like, he's one of my favorite boxers, has been for years. But now he's just getting to the point where his own fans are getting pissed off, including me. It's just like, what are you on about? It's like, what? Like, I'm trying to back him, and I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, no, I don't think he's scared of Usyk, and I think he will fight Usyk. He would fight him, and I think he would beat him. But then it's like he's saying stupid things like 500 million. What are you on about? Like, that's just not realistic. I looked at the purses for Usyk and Joshua. I think they got about $50 million each, which is probably just obviously if you convert that to pounds, maybe, I don't know, 30-40 million, which is still a lot. But then you'd think, because AJ is like one of the biggest stars in boxing, and if he's only getting that much, I say only, but in comparison to what Tyson Fury is talking about, it's ridiculous. He needs to get, he's a bit in cuckoo land. I don't even want to go into him because I'm such a big fan of him. But what is he on about?
That's it, and the contradiction is within his own words, because he says, this unknown foreigner, which I thought was a disgraceful comment. Yeah.
Tongue in cheek, though, isn't it? You know what he's like.
Yeah, but this unknown foreigner has just picked up a better win than anything on Tyson Fury's record. I think Usyk's win over Joshua on Saturday outweighs any win over Wilder, and it outweighs the Klitschko victory on Fury's resume. But that's a whole different argument. But I think you've got to have a level of understanding here from Tyson Fury to think, right, okay, you're saying that you want this amount of money to come out and fight an unknown foreigner, but how are we going to generate the money for that fight if he is this little unknown foreigner that you think? It's a contradiction within a contradiction.
Yeah, I didn't even think of it like that. Yeah, well, no, actually, that's a really good point, because he's comparing the narrative, the whole situation to Pacquiao and Floyd.
Exactly.
Well,
You know,
well,
he believes himself that he's going to generate $500,000 for himself off the Tyson Fury name, and that he's had one stadium fight in his career against Dillian White. You know, he's not done this solo the way Anthony Joshua sold out against Takam, Brazil, Joseph Parker. He's sold out against those names. Tyson Fury isn't and hasn't been able to do that, and it's almost like he believes himself that the Tyson Fury name is going to generate $500 million. But then, say if he wins this and Joshua goes and beats Dillian White and Deontay Wilder, and it becomes a more desirable fight that Joshua against Fury, what's he going to ask for there? $1 billion, because he's going to want more than what he got to fight Usyk. Well, you know, where does this stop?
But then, I totally agree with you. And the thing is, I don't want to say it, but then is he kind of like pricing him? Would you say he's pricing himself out, especially if he's giving it a week notice? Like, do you think he's doing it on purpose because he doesn't fancy the fight?
Again, it goes back to, I don't think even Tyson Fury doesn't know what he wants until he wakes up that day. You know, tomorrow he might come out and say, I'll do it for a $5. So I don't think he's ducking him, because I don't think Tyson Fury would duck anyone. I really, really don't believe that. I think he knows ways of maneuvering around certain situations. So it's interesting. I do think the fight gets made. I really do. Yeah.
Especially with all you need is the OG Bob Arum. When Tyson's chatting a little bit of crap, get Bob Arum. He's on that in the interview. He just clears the air, doesn't he? He goes, don't ignore him. He's talking nonsense about the Chisora rumors. He goes, ignore Fury.
You know, if that is the case, I actually don't mind that. You know, if they kind of let Tyson Fury go out and say what he does and say what he wants and does what he does, but then behind the scenes, Frank Warren, Bob Arum, Klimas and Team USYK are all together and making the fight, but he's just allowed to do what he wants. I don't mind that. If that means the fight gets made. But if he's actually out there believing what he's saying, that he's going to get $500 million to fight Usyk, then something needs to be said.
100%, but like I said, I think he's definitely got like some bipolar disorder, like not in a rude way. I think like I think he said himself he has got it. So I mean, I think the worst thing is, I think like the Twitter, like the media, TalkSport and stuff, they don't help, do they? Like half the stuff he's saying, like you said, he just thinks of it on the day. But I think the fight gets made as well. I don't think he's scared to fight Usyk, and I honestly think I think he obviously respects Usyk, but I do think he genuinely feel like who put a beating on him or do a job on him. And the thing is, that was clarified by Usyk in terms of whether the fight would happen, because Usyk said himself, whatever Fury says, look, he knows what Fury said to him face to face when they met in, I think it was New York that time, Bob Arum's birthday, for the Lomachenko fight, and he said the fight will happen. So look, there's obviously mutual respect there. Even like the foreigner stuff he's saying, I think he's just doing it tongue in cheek. He knows he's a world-class fighter, pound for pound, arguably the best fighter in the world. But yeah, I think hopefully the fight does get made. But if that fight does get made, then who do you fancy? That's a whole other conversation. But I thought I've got.
It is, and it really is, because, and this is going to sound contradictory, and if you speak to some of the Simbox team, I'm a good few $100 deep in bets on Joshua Fury from when it looked like it was going to happen back in 2021. I still back Joshua to beat Fury. I think styles make fights. And it's almost like a round robin. We had the conversation between us before about Wilder and Joshua, and that's a real pick-on fight. But I kind of like Fury beats Wilder, Wilder beats Joshua, Joshua beats Fury, and then Usyk beats Wilder, Usyk beats Joshua, loses to Fury. So, again, styles make fights. And if these fights get made, there's nothing wrong with Joshua having 3 losses on his record, Wilder having 2 losses on his record.
When they're saying like, oh, she should retire now, mate, he's got a white, like you said a few minutes ago, he can come back, fight White, who's still like top 5, top 7 best heavyweights in the world. If he does a job on him, he might fight Wilder. He might, but then put it this way: if Fury beats, let's just say Fury beats Usyk, and then Joshua beats White, everyone's going to be calling for that fight anyway, because like you said, styles make fights. Joshua's just come off a strong win. He might have a warm up and then fight White, because personally, I just can't see that Wilder fight happening between AJ and Wilder. But even if like if Fury beats Usyk and Joshua beats White, I think that fight will get made, and it's still huge because styles make fights.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I found interesting, and again, it was something I was trying to drum up on Twitter. You look at Joshua; he's lost 3 of his last 5, but in the middle of that, he gained revenge against Andrew Ruiz. He knocked out Pulev in great fashion, and then he's lost twice to the pound for pound king in Alexander Usyk, a former undisputed cruiserweight champion that stepped up. He's beat Derek Chisora and he's beat Anthony Joshua twice. There's no disgrace in that.
Yeah.
But then on the other side of the street, you've got Deontay Wilder, who scraped a draw against Fury the first time. He went in for the rematch with Luis Ortiz. He was losing that fight, and he pulled a punch from the gods and knocked him out in the 7th round. And then he went back-to-back beatings against Tyson Fury. In the second fight, he got battered for 7 rounds. In the trilogy fight, he had his moment of success, but he was beaten up for the fight went 11 rounds. He was beaten up for 8 of the 11 rounds, and he took some heavy shots, and that knockout in the 11th round was as savage as you're going to see. But now he comes back, everyone's clamouring for the excitement in the division because that's what Deontay Wilder brings. But he's coming back and he's fighting Alanius, which I think is a good fight for him. But there was no plan for him to retire. Look at some of the stuff that he was coming out with after the second fight with Tyson Fury. All these loaded gloves and the way he hammered his own team. And I just kind of think, well, where's that energy for Joshua? Why is it not? Welcome back with open arms. There's a lot of big fights. There's more big fights out there for Joshua than there is for Wilder. You look at Wilder and his Andy Ruiz, maybe. But in terms of realistic fights that could get made for Joshua, Zhang, Hrgovic, Ruiz, trilogy,
even
there's so much more options out there for Anthony Joshua. He's a bigger name, a bigger draw than Deontay Wilder. But all of a sudden, we're all calling, and it's British fans that are doing it, that are calling for Anthony Joshua to retire. I don't see that basis. He's not been knocked out flat in his face. He was stopped by Andrew Ruiz. He was beaten on points twice by the best boxer on the planet. Whereas Wilder was flattened twice, savagely. And he was losing his marbles out of the ring with some of the interviews that he was coming out with. But we're happy for him to return. Why is that not reciprocated for Anthony Joshua?
It is. I totally agree with you. I think it's a time thing. I think give it a couple months, gets another win, and then they're back on the bandwagon. That's how I feel. I feel like it's just ridiculous now. It's like so much contradiction. Like a lot of fight, the fans ask for the best fights. And then when they lose, then they're saying retire. What are you on about? Like, it's like his career is not on a. Of course, like the mindset going into that Usyk rematch was, my career's on the line, but it's not really. Like that Fury fight's always going to be there, and like you said, he won't ever. I reckon Usyk will be gone within a year or two because he'll probably have that Fury fight. Whether he wins that or not, I'm not sure. But then he's getting on a bit as well. So my point is, Joshua's a couple of years younger, so there's still chances for him to win a world title again, even become undisputed. Undisputed by fighting Fury. So I totally agree with you. I think it's just stupid, isn't it? Like people just.
Could you imagine if social media, Twitter, YouTube was that kind of thing after Mike Tyson got knocked out by Buster Douglas?
Oh my God!
They would have run him out of town.
It's ridiculous, and it's ridiculous. Look at even like the Sugar. Imagine Sugar Ray Leonard. Imagine the Four Kings. Imagine them fighting. Oh, Sugar Ray Leonard's lost against Roberto Duran. Now he's finished.
Yeah, Roberto Duran when Roberto Duran lost to Kirtland Lang. It's one of the biggest upsets of all time. And Duran still looked at as the greatest lightweight of all time. Social media has a lot to answer for. There's a lot of brilliance to it. Me and you are products of social media, but there's a lot of downsides to it as well.
100%. I think you've just got to choose what you listen to and take. Yeah. But good to talk about that fight. But just moving on, obviously, and recently announced that the Lee Wood will be fighting Mauricio Lara. What do you think of that? The first thing I just want to get off my chest: why is it at the same time as Joyce Parker? I was just because I'm thinking now, bloody hell, I'm a DAZN customer. I've got a DAZN. I'm thinking I'm leaning towards DAZN, but then I'm like, I really like that Queensberry card. But then I saw someone else make a comment on Twitter, and they were like, they'll watch both. They'll watch the DAZN, and then they'll record the Joyce Parker card and just not check Twitter. But then I'm thinking,
have you tried doing that? I'm not sure if you're into football or not, but I'm a Manchester United fan. Whenever there's a game on, of course, you follow United. When there's a game on or when there's a fight on, all I want to do is share my opinion, throughout, right, wrong. Whether it gets 1,000 likes or 0 likes, sometimes it's just that being able to express yourself and put it out there. So it is difficult to try and watch 2 cards on the same night, especially 2 cards, is so high profile. And you could definitely see that Eddie's loaded this card for 24th of September because of how good the Queensbury card is.
Yeah.
But as a paying boxing fan, like you say, we're paying for a subscription. We're going to pay for pay-per-view. It shouldn't be a choice. There is a lot of dates, and these fights are getting made left, right, and centre behind the scenes. You know, it's just a bit of sensibility.
What do you think the back card is then? Hard on, isn't it?
It is. I think Joseph Parker and Joe Joyce is the fight of the weekend.
Yeah.
So I agree to Queensbury, but Lee Wood against Mitchell Lara. I mean,
I think it's not much. I personally think it's not much. Okay, I think the Parker Joyce Parker fight is bigger. But I feel like that if you're a hardcore boxing fan, which we both are, that Wood Lara fight, ooh, because you think Lee Wood, okay, what a win against Michael Conlon, but then you think Lara, he's like the boogeyman. And I commented on Lee Wood's post, one of his tweets today. I said, look, I was honest with him. I said, look, respect, champ. I said, I fancy Lara, but it wouldn't surprise me if you prove me wrong. Best of luck. He liked it. I'm honest. I'm with Lara. I just think he's next level. There's a reason why Warrington hasn't had that really second rematch with him. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, but I think it's certainly a great fight, and it doesn't go 12 rounds. No way. I'd bet every penny I own on that fight ending inside the distance, and brutally as well. I think both guys could go down, could get back up. But I think the interesting thing is, so it's Lara, because we've seen what he done to Josh Warrington, and the fights after that, he's been in great form and he's looked destructive. But with Lee Wood, he's getting better with each fight, and he carries that power late. He stopped Zucan in a career best performance in the last round. He was knocked down early by Conlon, came back. It was a topsy-turvy fight, but Conlon was on top in that fight. And then it gets to that 12th round, and he produces arguably the knockout of the year. You know, it's up there with Joe Cardina's knockout of Agawa.
Definitely.
So we know that power's going to be there. Whether or not Lara sees that 12th round, who knows? He could get Lee Wood out of there. Lee Wood. I'm interested to see the betting lines on this. I want to see where the money's going, because I think that'd be a telltale sign on what people are thinking.
Yeah, 100%. But one thing that attracts me about the Queensbury card is Amanda Serrano. Literally, I've become a fan since the Katie Taylor Amanda Serrano fight. I've really become a fan of Amanda Serrano. Even there's so much respect for her. Honestly, she almost had Katie Taylor out of there. She went up 2 weight divisions, and that's a unification fight as well. So I think even that adds a bit of spice to that card as the co-main. I'm going to see what I'm going to do with that. But it's a shame.
The interesting thing with that Serrano fight is that there's no link there, if that makes sense. You know, you could imagine Eddie putting her on a matchroom card in the hope of making the Katie Taylor rematch, giving it a bigger platform to more eyeballs, attracting viewership to a potential rematch with Katie Taylor. But I think this going on to a Queensbury card just seems so left field. Like it was. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's fantastic that she's fighting in the UK. She's going to be in Manchester, so I'm going to go try my best to get an interview with her when she's at the final press conference and whatnot. I'm going to look forward to that. And I think it's great that again we've attracted that kind of fighter to the UK. I just think it's literally like an oddball fight in terms of where it's placed on the card. In terms of it doesn't really help Queensbury moving forward. That there's no one there for her to fight. It's not building towards anything. It is literally just a one-off.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's come out of nowhere. I thought, do you think it's got anything to do with obviously Jake Paul falling out with Eddie Hearn? And I think no. I think
possibly. I think Jake Paul has that kind of.
It's a bit ego, isn't it?
Yeah, the ego where he would be that pair, and he would go like, all right, so who else is in the UK? How can I piss Eddie off here? All right, I'll go to Queensbury and I'll put Amanda on Queensbury. Yeah, I do think there could be that element to it. I don't think it's ever anything serious between Jake Paul and Eddie Hearn, because I don't think Eddie Hearn sees him as a competitor in terms of the promotional side of things. I think it'll kind of massage the ego of Jake Paul to make a Serrano Katie Taylor fight and the rematch if that happens. But I don't actually think he looks at him as a credible boxer or a credible threat in terms of being a promoter.
100%, and I'm surprised Tommy Fury hasn't been added to that card yet. But I think what they're saying is he's going to get added to one of the London cards. So I'm not sure. Obviously, there was supposed to be Beterbiev and Anthony Yard. He could have gone on that card, but obviously that fight's not happening now. But let's see if he does get added to that card. That'll be interesting because obviously Jake Paul will be in attendance, and
I think
rated there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I didn't think of Jake Paul obviously being over here for that, but I think it's such a strange time for Tommy Fury. I worry for Tommy Fury because if he comes back, he's not going to be coming back against a light heavyweight contender. He will go with a guy that's got a few losses on his record, an away fighter, a journeyman. And I know some of the fighters that he has fought early in his career, tough guys, and he has beat them. But he can't go in with that level of opposition now after, Jake Paul was going after Hatsi Ratman and that fight didn't happen. Now he looks like he's fighting another pro boxer that's got a WBO ranking.
Who's that, Jake Paul?
Yeah, I can't remember the fella's name, but there's reports on Twitter that was a pro boxer. I think he was 15-2 or something like that. So Tommy Fury can't be coming back and going in with a guy that's 2-60 or 3-40. All due respect to away fighters, like I say, I'm good friends with a lot of away fighters, and I've done some good interviews with guys over the years that fight in the away corner. But at this moment in time, with the pressure that's on Tommy Fury from not taking that Jake Paul fight twice, he can't come in with that level of opposition. Yeah. I worry for him, and there's a certain level of intriguement there to see where he goes.
I think it's definitely going to be interesting. I did always kind of side with Tommy, but obviously with the what's happened recently, and that pulling out, and obviously maybe it wasn't his fault in his last occasion, obviously being being banned from the US, but let's see what happens with Tommy Fury. But just a quick one: who do you think is going to win the Parker and Joe Joyce fight then? Because I think that's a really interesting fight. Obviously, granite chin v granite chin. Yeah. Both top heavyweight contenders.
I think my initial thought, you kind of have that with any fight. You'd be the same as me. You get given two names, whether it's a fantasy fight or a fight in reality, and you kind of have that click, oh, it's him. But then when you kind of sit back and you go, wait a minute, let me take this in here, let me try and dissect this here, and you kind of weigh up his plus points against his weak points and vice versa. But these two match up very well. I think the favour is in Joe Joyce's size, because even though he is bigger, heavier, stronger, he does carry a really, really good engine. So it's not even like Parker could try and outbox him and drag him into the later rounds, because Joe Joyce is comfortable in the later rounds. So I think Joyce is a steady favourite. But the fact that Parker spends a lot of time around Tyson Fury, that kind of energy, he's got Andy Lee in his corner, who's a fantastic boxing brain. It's a close fight. But going to my head, I'll say Joe Joyce, and I think it'd be an ugly fight, and he'll win on points. I think there'd be a lot of holding, and both guys would be arriving towards the end of the fight. There could be a late stoppage, but I'd go Joe Joyce on points.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think there'll definitely be a close fight. I think if someone is to get the stoppage, I do side with Joe Joyce, because they're both called Joe.
Oh yeah, side with Joe. That's a good one.
Yeah, I thought let me just say this. Sometimes I just call fighters by their first name. Yeah. But even the press conference was a bit funny. He was like, remember Joe Joyce was being a bit animated. He was like, Little Joe. Was he? Do you remember that?
It's awkward at times, because they're not brash and they're not outspoken. No. But there is animosity there because of the way that fight was built up, and it was an announcement of announcement. Frank Warren loves that. But the fact that it didn't happen when it should have happened, there was that needle there. But they're not Tyson Fury. They're not Floyd Mayweather. They're not Deontay Wilder in terms of being able to speak and break things down and fire shots and have things ready to rebuttal whatever's coming back at them, and have that kind of verbal back and forth and that exchange. So it was a bit awkward at times.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, at least we'll probably get a good fight. That's the best.
Yeah, they'll let the fight do the talking, and that's what we're here for at the end of the day.
Yeah. Last fight on the list, best for last, should we say? Conor BENN and Chris Eubank Jr. O2 Arena. Was it October? Was it October 8th? Are you going to that or?
No, I'll be watching that at home. I think I've said this a few times. As boxing fans, I think people assume that we'll go to any and every fight, but sometimes I prefer when you obviously the atmosphere is second to none. I was at Calmbrook earlier on in this year, and that atmosphere was one of the best experiences of my life. I was watching it with my son. Yeah, but then at the same time, you don't watch the fight the same way, and sometimes you're looking for an instant replay, and if the big screens aren't on, you're not looking at things back, and you're enjoying the atmosphere and you're celebrating, or you're consoling yourself depending on which fighter wins and loses. But then you're dying to get home because you want to get back and watch the fight back and be like, because for instance, Kell Brook, Amir Khan, I thought that was quite a close fight. You know, when I was watching it live, and I watched it back on TV, and Brook battered him from rounds 1 to 6. You know, it was so one-sided, but because you're not seeing the impact of the punches live, you're just kind of going off the shouts and the cheers, and it depends whether you sat next to Khan fans or Brook fans. Which way playing.
Was he next to a lot of Khan fans then, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was definitely a pro Khan arena. Again, a special occasion. And I did say we could go off on a tangent, and here we are. You know, talk about Khan Brook when we was meant to Ben EUBANK. But my point being is that I won't necessarily go out my way to go to some of these fights when I'll be more intrigued to watch it on TV.
100%. And
what a fight, what an occasion! And you know, I don't listen to these naysayers on Facebook and Twitter and looking at the detractions and why this fight shouldn't happen and blah 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 blah, and they should be fighting in welterweight and middleweight and these other fights.
Happy, isn't it?
Yeah, balls to that. Like, sign me up for this. The WWE nature to it, the fact that the fathers could be in the corners and there's that back and forth. You know, put them in a steel cage for all I care. You know, last man standing. Because I'm here for all that, all the dramatics, and this fight brings it all. They're both great talkers. They both literally like embody their fathers. It's like they're reborn again, and I'm here for all that. And I think it's going to produce absolute fireworks on the night.
100%. Well said, Luke. I just think one thing that's on my mind is the weight cut. Because I'm not sure, because you see Chris EUBANK Jr., he is shredded at 160.
Yeah,
he's always shredded, but how is he going to make? I think he will make it, but it's 157 pounds, isn't it? 157. He needs to make.
They're saying that if he comes in over 159 or whatnot, that Team Ben will have the option to call the fight off. You know, even if it's very last minute. I do think it comes down to the weight, but then also as much as coming down to that weight is, you know, the big selling part in this fight becoming more 50-50, you know, as EUBANK said himself at the press conference, he'd be at 60%, because if he was at 100%, it would be a public execution, which I thought was a brilliant line. He loves a soundbite, Chris EUBANK. He's brilliant at that kind of thing.
And I think he's really... Quick one, sorry to interrupt you. I was really impressed with how Chris EUBANK Jr. portrayed, like, just his demeanor, like how he was at that press conference. I thought it was classy, very mature. Because normally he's the one who's being a bit like delusional and stuff. But I just thought everything he was just very. I just loved the way he acted at that press conference. It really showed that the maturity gap, and Conor Benn at times seemed a little bit fiery, a little bit childish, and
it's not going to be that way. And you know, I was just to finish my previous point, that I think from what Eddie was saying is that the rehydration clause is less than the mandated IBF rehydration clause, which I think is £10. So if it's less than that, you're looking at Chris EUBANK coming in at 166, 167, when usually he'd come in at 175, 178. You know, that's where the problem's going to be, the rehydration. Of course, he's going to have to cut down, but then trying to rehydrate in time as well. And did I hear that it's same day weigh-in? Is that a thing? You know, because that's dangerous as well. That's massively in Conor Benn's favour.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. So, who you got winning that fight then? Because I think despite the weight struggles, I just think Chris EUBANK Jr. too big, too strong, granite chin. He's been up there obviously at super middle as well. He's fought at a high level. You know, he's been in. I know he's lost, but he's been in there with Groves, been in there with De Gale. Who else? Saunders. And
Abraham.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of fighters. So
I think I'll be able to make a more informed prediction closer to the time. You know, you kind of see guys in the gym and maybe nearer to the weigh-in and things like that. But going back to the comment I made earlier about when you have that instant reaction, you give them two names and you go, who wins? And the first name into my head is EUBANK. Although I do prefer Conor Benn. I don't dislike Chris EUBANK. I'm a big fan of Chris EUBANK. You know, I buy into the whole persona, the cockiness, the arrogance, and all that. I like it. And Conor Benn's the flip side to that. But I think this fight, what I will say earlier, without giving a definitive prediction, is that this fight is won on who controls their emotion best. Because they're going to take so much pride into this fight. You know, the family pride, the family name, the whole historic nature, nostalgia to the fight. Who controls that better in the ring? Because you favour EUBANK in that aspect, because Ben does fight with rawness and he needs that fire in his belly to go in there. But look at Liam Williams. He tried approaching in a different way. He tried approaching Chris EUBANK with a lot of hatred, a lot of fire, a lot of animosity to fuel him. He was in Cardiff. He was in front of his home city, his home fans. And Chris EUBANK just, pot-shotted him, dropped him with a jab in the first round and, beat him up for pretty much 12 rounds. And that has a slight indication of how this fight could play out for Chris Eubank. You know, if Chris Eubank wins, I think it'd be very similar to the way he beat Liam Williams. But if you get stop Conor Benn, it becomes more even, and then the weight issue comes into it. Then is he going to punch? Because Conor Benn is a big puncher. He says that he spars with middleweights and super middleweights to put them down. So we'll see. We'll see. It's a great fight. It's a great event, and I'm here for every second of the build-up. You know, if I see any snippets on YouTube, on DAZN, or whatever, YouTube and stuff like that, then I click on it and I watch it and I listen to it. So I'm going to be here for all the build-up, and the fight's just going to be the cherry on the cake, and it's going to be an explosive fight one way or another, I think.
Yeah, don't worry. We've got a good month or two. Yeah, we might have to do a watch along for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Watch your space.
Watch your space. But Luke, it's been a good. Thanks for coming on. It's been wicked chatting with you about all the fights that are coming up, and I'd like to go on your channel soon as well, guys. All my subscribers, check out Simbox. Great platform. He's had an interview with Tasha Jones today. So when's that going out, Luke?
Yeah, so that'll be available tomorrow. A really good chat with Tasha Jones. She's defending her world title, and she's looking to unify as well. She's going in with the WBC title on the line against Patricia Bergelt, undefeated herself at the super welterweight division, September 3rd. So it was a really good chat with Tasha Jones. So that'll be up tomorrow. I appreciate the shout out there, and thanks for having me on. I think a bright future ahead with Simbox and Cam Talks Boxing moving forward.
We'll be doing a lot. I'll put the link of your channel in the comments in the comments below.
I can't even pronounce her name. Talking numbers on the phone while I'm getting brains. Switch 4 lanes, I'm in my own lane. You can catch me riding in that foreign thing.